Lenora Avery had been looking forward to her Tuesday morning routine. Coffee on the porch, a few moments with her devotional book, and maybe a walk to the corner market. She'd retired from the post office 3 years ago, and she treasured these quiet mornings. The mailbox at the end of her driveway usually held nothing more dramatic than catalogs and utility bills, but today there was a thick manila envelope with a return address that made her stomach tighten. Harmony Ridge Extended Care Facility. She stood at the mailbox, the morning sun suddenly too bright, the envelope heavy in her hand. Why would a nursing home be sending her anything? She didn't know anyone at Harmony Ridge. She'd never even heard of the place. Inside the envelope was a bill, not a small bill, not a mistake she could laugh off. $214,179.32, due in full within 30 days. Lenora's knees went weak. She clutched the mailbox post, her vision swimming. The paper shook in her hand as she read the invoice breakdown. 6 months of extended care, skilled nursing, physical therapy, memory care unit, medications, every line itemized. Every charge adding up to a sum that would destroy her. But she had never lived there. She had never stepped foot inside that building. Her hands trembled as she flipped through the attached documents. Admission forms, medical assessments, discharge paperwork. All of it stamped with dates from March through August, months when she'd been perfectly fine, living in her own home, going to church, tending her garden. And then she saw the signature authorizing her admission. Rashad Avery, her son. Lenora made it back to the house on legs that felt like water. She dropped the envelope on the kitchen table and stared at it, her heart hammering in her chest. This had to be a mistake, some terrible clerical error, identity theft maybe. But Rashad's name was right there. No. There has to be an explanation. Rashad he couldn't. She reached for her phone with shaking hands and dialed her son's number. It rang 4 times before going to voicemail. She tried again. Same result. Rashad, baby, it's Mama. I need you to call me back right away. It's important. Her voice cracked. It's urgent, honey. Please call me. She set the phone down and forced herself to breathe, to think. The nursing home had a phone number on the letterhead. Maybe if she called them, they could clear this up. Maybe they'd realize they'd sent the bill to the wrong person. The woman who answered at Harmony Ridge had a professional, pleasant voice that made Lenora want to scream. Good morning, Harmony Ridge Extended Care. This is Sheila. How may I help you? Yes, hello. My name is Lenora Avery, and I just received a bill from your facility. But there's been some kind of mistake. I've never been a patient there. A pause, computer keys clicking. Let me pull up your account, Ms. Avery. Can you confirm your date of birth? Lenora gave it, her mouth dry. Yes, I have you right here. You were admitted on March 15th and discharged on August 23rd. Your son, Rashad Avery, signed the admission paperwork as your power of attorney. No. Lenora's voice came out sharp. No, that's not possible. I don't have a power of attorney, and I was not in your facility. I was home. She stopped, trying to steady her breathing. There's been a terrible mistake. Ma'am, I understand this must be confusing, but our records are quite clear. Your son provided all the necessary documentation. He visited regularly and handled all the financial arrangements through Medicaid. Medicaid? I never applied for Medicaid. I have Medicare and supplemental insurance. I don't understand what you're talking about. Sheila's voice took on a note of carefully trained patience. Miss Avery, I really think you should speak with our billing department and your son. There may be some memory issues that... I don't have memory issues. Lenora's voice rose despite herself. I'm telling you, I was never at your facility. This is fraud. Someone has stolen my identity. I understand you're upset, ma'am. Let me transfer you to our administrator, Mr. Jerome Ellis. He can review your case personally. Lenora waded through hold music, her hands clenched so tight her nails bit into her palms. When Jerome Ellis came on the line, his voice was smooth and practiced, the kind that dealt with difficult situations every day. Ms. Avery, I've just pulled your file. I can assure you everything was done properly. Your son brought in all the required documentation, medical assessments, power of attorney, Medicaid approval. We wouldn't have admitted you without proper authorization. Then your paperwork is forged, Lenora said, her voice shaking, because I never gave anyone power of attorney, and I certainly never lived in your facility. Ma'am, with all due respect, we have extensive documentation, phone interviews, medical evaluations, signatures. If you believe there's been fraud, you're welcome to file a dispute through the proper channels. But the charges stand until proven otherwise. The proper channels, as if she knew where to start, as if she wasn't a retired postal worker who'd never dealt with anything more complicated than helping neighbors file change of address forms. I want copies of everything, Lenora said, forcing steel into her voice. Every document you have with my name on it. I want to see these signatures you're talking about. You can submit a written request to our records department. Allow 10 to 15 business days for processing. 2 weeks? Lenora's voice cracked. This bill says payment is due in 30 days. That's our standard policy, ma'am. I'm sorry, but those are the rules. Lenora hung up before she said something she'd regret. Her hands were shaking so badly she could barely set the phone down. She stared at the paperwork spread across her kitchen table. Papers that claimed she'd spent 6 months in a nursing home she'd never seen. That her son had authorized it all. That she owed more money than she'd earned in 2 years of work. Her phone rang. Rashad's name lit up the screen. She grabbed it. Rashad, baby, I need you to tell me. Mama, what's wrong? You sounded scared in your message. I got a bill from a nursing home, Harmony Ridge. They're saying I was a patient there for 6 months. They're saying you signed the admission papers. Silence on the other end. Then, what? The bill, Rashad. It's for over $200,000, and they have your name on the paperwork. Mama, that's crazy. I never signed anything like that. This has to be some kind of scam. Did you call them back? Yes. They insist it's real. They have documentation. They said you gave them power of attorney. I don't have power of attorney for you, Mama. You know that. This is identity theft or something. Don't panic, okay? Don't do anything. Let me look into this. His voice sounded right. Concerned. Shocked. But something nagged at Lenora, a tiny whisper of doubt she didn't want to acknowledge. Can you come over? She asked. I need to show you the papers. I'm at work right now, but I can swing by after. Don't worry, Mama. We'll figure this out. It's probably just someone who stole your information. We'll get it sorted. After he hung up, Lenora sat at her kitchen table and tried to believe him. Tried to convince herself that this was just a horrible mistake, that her son would come over and help her fix it, that everything would be okay. But the papers on the table told a different story, and somewhere deep in her gut, fear was beginning to curdle into something worse. Suspicion. Rashad showed up 3 hours later looking tired. He worked construction, and his clothes still had drywall dust on them. He hugged Lenora at the door, and for a moment, she let herself believe everything was fine. Let me see the papers, he said. She spread them across the table. Rashad picked up the invoice first, his eyes widening at the total. Then he flipped through the admission forms, his expression darkening. This is messed up, Mama. I didn't sign any of this. Look at the signature line, Lenora said quietly. He stared at it. His name was there, in handwriting that looked not exactly like his, but close enough to be unsettling. Someone forged my signature, he said. Mama, someone's running a scam. We need to call the police. The nursing home says they have documentation, medical evaluations, phone interviews. They said you visited regularly. Rashad's jaw tightened. I've never even heard of Harmony Ridge. Where is it? Lenora pulled out her phone and searched. The facility was in the next county, about 40 minutes away. Close enough to be plausible, far enough that she'd never accidentally driven past it. Rashad, she said slowly, did you tell anyone about me? About my health, my finances, anything like that? He looked at her, and something flickered in his eyes, just for a second. What? No. Why would I? I'm just trying to understand how someone could have so much information. They knew your name. They knew my birth date. They knew enough to file Medicaid paperwork. Mama, identity theft is sophisticated these days. These people hack databases, steal medical records, all kinds of stuff. It's not your fault. He sounded reasonable. He sounded like he was trying to help. But Lenora couldn't shake the feeling that something was wrong. She'd raised this boy. She knew when he was nervous. And right now, Rashad was nervous. I need you to be honest with me, she said quietly. Did you have anything to do with this? His face went through several emotions, shock, hurt, anger, before settling on wounded dignity. Mama, how can you even ask me that? You think I'd steal from you? You think I'd put you in a nursing home and rack up bills? I didn't say that. No, you did say it. You just asked if I had something to do with this. He stood up, his chair scraping against the floor. I came over here to help you and you're accusing me. Rashad, sit down. Please, I'm not accusing you. I'm scared. He stayed standing, his jaw tight. I think you need to call your bank. Check your credit report. File a police report. I'll help you do all of that, but I'm not going to sit here and be treated like a criminal. I'm sorry. Lenora's voice broke. I'm sorry, baby. I'm just so confused. I don't know what to think. His expression softened slightly. I know, Mama. This is messed up, but we'll figure it out, okay? Just don't jump to conclusions. He left 20 minutes later, promising to call the next day. Lenora watched him drive away and felt something crack inside her chest. She wanted to believe him. She needed to believe him. But that flicker in his eyes, that moment of something that looked almost like panic, haunted her. Lenora didn't sleep that night. She lay in bed staring at the ceiling, her mind spinning through possibilities, each one worse than the last. By morning, she'd made a decision. She would get every piece of documentation, follow every thread, and find out the truth, no matter where it led. Lenora hung up and sat at her kitchen table, the weight of it all pressing down on her. She needed help, real help. She pulled out her church directory and found the number for Marlene Knox, an attorney who attended their congregation. Marlene answered on the third ring. When Lenora explained the situation, there was a long pause. Lenora, I'm going to be straight with you. This sounds like Medicaid fraud. And if your son's name is on the paperwork, he's implicated whether he did it or not. He says he didn't do it. Do you believe him? Lenora closed her eyes. I don't know. Then we need to find out. Can you come to my office tomorrow? Bring every piece of paperwork you have. We'll go through it together. That afternoon, Lenora sat on her porch trying to make sense of everything when her neighbor, Mrs. Henrietta Vaughn, came over with a plate of cookies. You looked troubled yesterday, Henrietta said. Thought you could use something sweet. Lenora accepted the cookies with a wan smile. Henrietta had lived next door for 15 years, and they'd shared countless conversations over this fence. She was safe. "I'm having some trouble," Lenora admitted. "Someone's been using my identity, filing paperwork in my name." Henrietta's eyebrows rose. "Oh, Lord. That happened to my cousin last year. Took her months to straighten out. When did you notice?" "Yesterday. I got a bill from a nursing home I've never been to." Henrietta frowned. "A nursing home? That's strange. You know, now that you mention it, there were some people here back in the spring, government-looking types. They came to your door when you weren't home." Lenora's heart skipped. "When? March, maybe? April? I remember because my azaleas were just starting to bloom. They had clipboards and official-looking badges. I thought maybe it was a census thing or something about your property taxes." "Did you see what they did?" "They knocked for a while, then left something on your door. A notice, I think. You were probably at church or the market." Lenora tried to remember. Had there been any official notices? She couldn't recall, but March was when the nursing home claimed she'd been admitted. "Henrietta, did you happen to see if anyone was with them, or if they talked to anyone else?" The older woman thought for a moment. "Not that I noticed, but you know, your son was here around that time, too. I saw him leaving one afternoon, had a woman with him." "A woman? What did she look like?" "Professional, wearing scrubs or medical-looking clothes. I figured she was a girlfriend, maybe a nurse he was dating. Pretty young thing." Paula. It had to be Paula Whitfield, the woman Rashad had been seeing for the past year. He'd mentioned she worked in healthcare administration. Rashad had been vague about how they met, something about a hospital billing issue he'd helped her resolve. At the time, Lenora had thought it was sweet. Now she wondered if there had been something calculated about it from the start. Lenora's hands went cold. "Did they go inside my house?" "I think so. I remember because your son had a key, of course. They were in there maybe 20, 30 minutes. Lenora thanked Henrietta and went back inside, her mind reeling. Rashad had been to her house in March, with Paula. Around the same time the nursing home claimed she'd been admitted. No, there has to be another explanation. He had a key because he's my son. Of course he comes by sometimes. Of course he might bring his girlfriend. But the timing was too coincidental. And those government people Henrietta had seen, what if they'd been from the nursing home? What if they'd been conducting some kind of fake assessment? Lenora went to her filing cabinet and pulled out her medical records from that spring. She'd had a minor health scare in February, chest pains that turned out to be nothing serious. She'd spent one night in the hospital for observation. One night, just overnight. Rashad had been there with her, and Paula had stopped by the hospital with flowers. That's when they could have taken copies of my insurance cards, my Medicare information, maybe even my signature from hospital forms. The thought made her physically sick. The documents from Harmony Ridge arrived 10 days later. Lenora brought them straight to Marlene Knox's office, and they spent 2 hours going through every page. The signature on the power of attorney looked unnervingly like Lenora's own. Not exact. A handwriting expert could probably tell the difference, but close enough that she could see how someone might believe it was real. The loops in the L were almost right. The slant was similar. Whoever had forged this had practiced, had studied her signature carefully, probably from those hospital forms Rashad had authorized back in February. "This is sophisticated," Marlene said grimly. Whoever did this knew exactly what they were doing. They filed the Medicaid application, forged the power of attorney, and created a paper trail that makes it look legitimate. Could Paula have done this? Lenora asked quietly. She works in healthcare. She'd know how the system works. It's possible. But we need more proof. Right now, all we have is your word against a mountain of paperwork. Marlene picked up one of the forms and studied it closely. There's something odd here. Look at the dates on these medical evaluations. Lenora leaned in. The evaluation was dated March 22nd. But according to the admission papers, she'd supposedly been admitted on March 15th. They evaluated me after I was already admitted? Exactly. That's not how it's supposed to work. And look at this. The signature on the evaluation is from Dr. Lionel Avery. Any relation? No, I've never heard of him. We should talk to him, and we need to find out who actually conducted these phone interviews they keep mentioning. Marlene made notes on a legal pad. Lenora, I'm going to bring in a social worker I trust. Her name is Renee Patterson. She specializes in elder fraud cases. She can help us dig into the Medicaid paperwork and find the inconsistencies. How long will this take? I don't know, but I need to ask you something difficult. Marlene set down her pen and looked directly at Lenora. Have you talked to Rashad about any of this? He came by the day I got the bill. He denied everything. Do you believe him? Lenora's throat tightened. This was her son, the boy she'd raised alone after his father left, the boy who'd brought her flowers on Mother's Day and called her every Sunday. But she thought of the flicker in his eyes, the defensiveness, the way he'd left in a hurry. I don't know, she whispered. I want to, but I don't know. Marlene reached across the desk and squeezed her hand. I'm sorry, Lenora. I know this is hard, but we're going to get to the bottom of it, I promise. That night, Lenora couldn't sleep. She kept thinking about February, the hospital, the chest pains, the overnight stay. Paula had been so attentive, so helpful. She'd even offered to pick up Lenora's prescription on the way home. What if that wasn't kindness? What if that was the beginning of the plan? At 2 a.m, Lenora got up and went to her filing cabinet again. She pulled out every medical document from that hospital stay, every form she'd signed. And there, on the patient information sheet, she saw it, a photocopy request form. Someone had requested copies of her insurance cards, her Medicare information, and her driver's license. The signature authorizing the request wasn't hers. It was Rashad's. She stared at it for a long time, tracing the familiar handwriting with her finger. This wasn't a forgery. This was real. Her son had authorized someone to take copies of her personal information. The question wasn't whether he was involved anymore. The question was why. Lenora sat in her kitchen as dawn broke, the photocopy request form spread out in front of her like an accusation. Rashad's signature, his handwriting. She'd know it anywhere. She'd watched him learn to write his name in kindergarten, helped him practice for hours until he could sign his school papers with pride. This wasn't a forgery. This was real. He took my information. He gave it to someone. But why? Why would he do this to me? Her phone buzzed. A text from Rashad. Checking in. You okay this morning? Let me know if you need anything. The normalcy of it made her want to scream. How could he text her like everything was fine? How could he ask if she needed anything when he what? What had he done, exactly? Maybe he gave Paula the information for something innocent. Maybe she's the one who did this without him knowing. Maybe he's a victim too. But even as she tried to convince herself, she knew it wasn't true. Rashad had been nervous that first night, defensive, quick to deflect. Those weren't the reactions of an innocent man. Lenora didn't respond to the text. Instead, she called Marlene Knox's office and left a voicemail. I found something. The hospital forms. Rashad's signature is on them. He authorized copies of my information in February. Call me. By noon, Lenora had an appointment with Renee Patterson, the social worker Marlene had mentioned. They met at a small coffee shop downtown, away from prying eyes and familiar faces. Renee was in her 50s, with kind eyes and the no-nonsense demeanor of someone who'd seen too much suffering to waste time on pleasantries. Marlene briefed me on your case, Renee said, pulling out a laptop. This pattern, fake nursing home admission, Medicaid fraud, power of attorney forgery, it's more common than you'd think, but it's usually strangers doing it, not family. So you believe me? I believe your paperwork doesn't add up. Let's start with the Medicaid application. Do you have a copy? Lenora handed over the stack of documents she'd received from the state. Renee went through them methodically, making notes, occasionally pulling up something on her computer to cross-reference. Here, Renee said, tapping a form, the needs assessment. It claims you require assistance with 6 activities of daily living: bathing, dressing, eating, toileting, transferring, and continence. Someone had to conduct this assessment in person. Do you remember anyone coming to your home for an evaluation? No, never. Look at the signature of the assessor. Does that name mean anything to you? Lenora squinted at the scrawled signature. Sarah Henderson. I don't know anyone by that name. She's listed as a licensed social worker. Let me check. Renee typed rapidly. Her expression darkened. Sarah Henderson had her license suspended 2 years ago for falsifying assessments. She's not supposed to be conducting any evaluations. They used a disgraced social worker, someone who'd do the paperwork for money without asking questions. This is good, Renee said. This is evidence of fraud. If we can prove this assessment never actually happened, the entire Medicaid approval falls apart. Lenora felt a flicker of hope. If the assessment was fake, maybe this whole nightmare could be undone. But that hope was immediately crushed by a darker thought. Fake assessments meant someone had gone to elaborate lengths to frame her, someone who knew the system well enough to exploit it. What about my son? What about Rashad? Renee's expression softened. Lenora, I need to ask you some difficult questions. Has Rashad had financial troubles recently? Lenora thought back. Rashad had mentioned being laid off last winter. He'd found the construction job quickly, but she knew it paid less than his previous work, and he'd asked to borrow money twice in the past year. Small amounts, a few $100s each time, which he'd paid back. He's been struggling, Lenora admitted, but not enough to do something like this. What about Paula, his girlfriend? What do you know about her? Not much. He's been seeing her for about a year. She works at... Lenora stopped, a realization hitting her. She works at a healthcare management company. She handles billing and insurance claims. Renee wrote that down. Do you know which company? No, Rashad never said. We need to find out, because someone with healthcare administration experience would know exactly how to file these applications, forge the right signatures, create a paper trail that looks legitimate. That evening, Lenora couldn't stop thinking about what Renee had said. She tried to distract herself with television, but every few minutes her mind would drift back to the same terrible question. What if I'm wrong? What if there really is something wrong with me and I just don't remember? She stood in front of her bathroom mirror, studying her reflection. 58 years old, still sharp, still independent, still herself. But how would I know if I was losing my memory? Would I even realize it? She thought back over the past 6 months. Had there been gaps in her memory, days she couldn't quite recall? She'd forgotten a dentist appointment in April, but that was normal, wasn't it? Everyone forgot appointments sometimes. The fear crept in like cold water. What if the nursing home's records were real? What if she had been there and her mind had simply erased it? No. She would remember. She would know. Wouldn't I? She shook off the doubt and did something she'd never done before. She drove to Rashad's apartment unannounced. She needed answers. She needed to look him in the eye and know the truth. His car was in the parking lot, lights on in the apartment. But when she knocked, no one answered. She could hear voices inside, raised voices, angry. Lenora hesitated, her hand hovering over the door. She should leave. She should call first. But something about those voices made her lean closer, pressing her ear against the wood. The voices were muffled, indistinct through the door, but she caught fragments. "Told you this would happen," Rashad's voice frightened. "Just calm down," a woman's voice. "Paula. My mother. Too late now." The words weren't clear enough to understand the full conversation. The door was thick, and they were speaking in urgent, hushed tones now, as if afraid someone might hear. But the tone was unmistakable. Fear, anger, desperation. Arguments interrupted by long silences, and she definitely heard her name mentioned, maybe twice. Lenora backed away from the door, her heart pounding. They're hiding something. Something about me. But what? She stumbled back to her car, her hands shaking so badly she could barely get the key in the ignition. Before she could pull out of the parking lot, her phone rang. Rashad's name on the screen. She stared at it. Answer? Ignore? She answered. "Mama." His voice was thick, broken. "Mama, I need to talk to you. Can I come over tonight?" "About what, Rashad?" A long pause. "About everything. About what's been happening. His voice cracked. "I messed up, Mama. I messed up really bad." Lenora's throat tightened. "Come over," she said quietly. "We'll talk." She hung up and sat in her car, waiting for her hands to stop shaking enough to drive. The parking lot was nearly empty, lit by a single flickering streetlight. She watched a cat slink between the cars, hunting for something in the shadows. He's going to tell me the truth, and I'm terrified of what that truth might be. She hung up and sat in her car, waiting for her hands to stop shaking enough to drive. The parking lot was nearly empty, lit by a single flickering streetlight. She watched a cat slink between the cars, hunting for something in the shadows. Inside that apartment, her son was preparing to confess something that had made him sound broken on the phone, something that involved Paula and paperwork and lies. He's going to tell me the truth, and I'm terrified of what that truth might be. The drive home took 20 minutes, but it felt like hours. Every red light gave her too much time to think. Every dark street made her wonder if she was strong enough for what was coming. When she pulled into her driveway, she saw that the porch light was on. She always left it on, a habit from when Rashad was young and coming home late. A small kindness, a beacon saying, "You're welcome here, you're safe here, you're loved here." Will I still feel that way after tonight? Will I still be able to leave the light on for him? She went inside and made tea she didn't drink, straightened the magazines on the coffee table, fluffed the pillows on the couch. Busy work. Anything to keep her hands occupied while she waited, and waited, and waited for the sound of her son's car in the driveway, bringing whatever truth would change everything between them forever.